What to do, ladies and gentlemen? In this video, we will be going over 20 minutes worth of fun facts. I will say, I made these into shorts back about 2 years ago, so some of the references might not make too much sense. Nonetheless, these fun facts do still apply, so I do hope that you guys sit back, relax, and enjoy. Justin Tucker has proven that he may be the best kicker to ever do it in NFL history. And as great as Justin Tucker was, he was never an MVP. The only kicker that can ever say that is Mark Moseley. Kicking as a member of then-named Washington Redskins, Moseley finished with a 95 percentage, which was a record at the time. The strike in 1982, I'm sure, helped Moseley win this award. Will Tucker ever win it?
Nope.
Clearly, you can't imagine the NFC East without these four teams in that division. But have you guys ever wondered why the Cowboys are in the NFC East? Washington, Philadelphia, and New York clearly are all on the East Coast, but the Cowboys are located in Texas. In short, Washington, Philadelphia, and Dallas were actually part of a different division altogether called NFC Capital. Additionally, at the time, Commissioner Rozelle randomly drew the framework of the NFC divisions. There were 5 pitches to Commissioner Rozelle as to which team goes where to which division. And only 1 out of 5 of these options actually had the Cowboys in the NFC East. Through sheer luck, Commissioner Rozelle randomly chose the one option that had the Cowboys in the NFC East. Had it been the other 80% or the other 4 options, the Minnesota Vikings would actually be part of the NFC East. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that in football, if you score 6 points, that means you scored a touchdown. If you scored 3 points, that means a field goal. If you scored 2 points, that means a safety. But did you know there's a way that you can score literally just 1 point? Meaning a final score could technically be 6-1. In order for this to happen, a team needs to score a touchdown and then attempt an extra point. And this extra point needs to go catastrophically wrong for the kicking team. The football needs to somehow get all the way to the back of the end zone and either roll past it, or a kicking team's player needs to recover the ball and be tackled in their own end zone. It has to be an absolutely nutty play, but it is possible. Many people consider the Packers and the Bears to be the oldest teams in the NFL. And a lot of people probably make that association because they were successful way back then. However, did you guys know that the honor of oldest team goes to the Arizona Cardinals? And actually by a long shot. The Packers and the Bears were founded in the 1920s. Meanwhile, the Cardinals go as far back as 1898. So nearly 20 years older than the next current NFL team. Back then, they were named the Morgan Athletic Club. As far as oldest teams go, the order goes Cardinals, Bears, Packers, Giants, and Lions. When the Eagles won their first Super Bowl in franchise history a few years back, they got knocked off of an exclusive list of teams that have never won the Super Bowl. In fact, nearly a third of the NFL teams currently have never won the big one. That includes the Cleveland Browns, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Atlanta Falcons, the Houston Texans, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Tennessee Titans, the Buffalo Bills, the Minnesota Vikings, the Arizona Cardinals, the Carolina Panthers, the Los Angeles Chargers, and the Detroit Lions. The Lions, Jaguars, Texans, and Browns have actually never even made it to the Super Bowl. Will anything change? My money is on the Bills winning their first one this year, but maybe that's too premature. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this to me was absolutely a crazy fact because I grew up around the DMV, so I was always around the Washington Commanders, and it was pretty easy to get yourself a season ticket with them. The same cannot be said if you're a Packers fan. Packers season tickets have been sold out since 1960. In fact, the waiting list is said to be over 1,000 years long, with about 140,000 people said to be on that waiting list as of May of 2022. Go Pack Go, I guess. The Bears will take on the Washington Commanders in what should be just an epic clash among 2 titans of the NFC. Hopefully, it's an interesting game and not like one they had back in 1940. In that championship game where the Bears took on Washington, the Bears destroyed the Redskins 73-0 in a score that we probably will never see again. The main reason why the Bears ran the score up was because the Washington owner, George Marshall, was talking so much trash, calling the Bears gutless and calling their head coach, George Halas, a crybaby. They were also taunting a win they had against them earlier in the year. This is some classic The North Remembers type stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Taysom Hill for the New Orleans Saints has the reputation of the do-it-all gadget player. If you need him to run, catch a football, throw a pass, he can pretty much do it all. Some would consider him to be the, quote, jack of all trades. But even Taysom Hill pales in comparison to one Sammy Baugh. He had the reputation of being the truly first great gadget player. In 1943, Sammy Baugh led not only in passing because he was a stellar quarterback, but he also led in interceptions on defense and punting yards, meaning he led a statistical category in every single phase of football. Taysom Hill has a long way to go. Now that week 6 is come and gone, every team in the AFC North either has a 3-3 or 2-4 record, meaning they're just a game away from each other. One of these teams is the Cleveland Browns, who are looking to have their first division title in over 30 years. This drought is so tremendous that the Houston Oilers, now the Tennessee Titans, have won a title in this division more recently than the Cleveland Browns have. The Houston Oilers won this divisional title in 1993. Will the Browns be able to turn it around and get their first divisional title in 30 plus years? I certainly hope not. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that the Russell Wilson experiment hasn't been the difference maker that we thought it would be. And if things don't turn around soon, this could turn out to be one of the worst signings in NFL history. But that's a story for another day. Whenever the Broncos make the Super Bowl, they need to step it up in terms of passing. Because in the Super Bowls that the Broncos have been in, which is 8, they have only scored 4 passing touchdowns. Need I remind you that the quarterbacks involved include Peyton Manning and John Elway? Doug Williams, who's only been part of one single Super Bowl, has as many touchdowns as the entire Broncos organization in one game versus Broncos 8 games. No wonder they've lost more Super Bowls than they've won. Okay guys, we all know Jerry Rice is the greatest receiver of all time, arguably the greatest player in NFL history. And I'm sure you guys know that he's ranked in first place as far as receiving touchdowns go all time. The next closest person is Randy Moss with 156, a solid 41 behind Jerry. Devontae Adams and Mike Evans are currently tied for first place among active players with 78 apiece. Yet they would still need another 120 to break his record, and they're not getting any younger. Jamar Chase, who has had a historically great rookie campaign with 13 touchdowns, would need to repeat this process again for 14 more years, and he would still be 2 touchdowns behind. Even in today's passing league, this is going to be one of those records that will take a very long time for anyone to break. On Sunday, October 23rd, the Cincinnati Bengals defeated the Atlanta Falcons 35-17, with Joe Burrow specifically having an outstanding game. But did you guys know that Joe Burrow actually broke a few records in this game? With this win, it is now his 5th career game with over 400 passing yards, which breaks Dan Marino's record for most 400-yard passing games in the first 3 years of your NFL career. Additionally, he's only the 2nd quarterback to have multiple 475 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown in a single game since Norm Van Brocklin did it in 1951. Finally, he's the only quarterback to have ever had multiple games where he has over 500 offensive yards and 4 total touchdowns. We all know that the Steelers' offense has been historically bad this year. One specific stat featuring their new franchise quarterback Kenny Pickett is particularly bad. Through 4 games that Kenny Pickett has played in, he has thrown 7 interceptions. When I tell you guys that's bad, I mean it's historically bad. The only saving grace that Pickett has is that the only other quarterback to have a similar statistic through 4 games was Terry Bradshaw. The same Terry Bradshaw who brought the Steelers 3 Super Bowls in the 70s. So who knows, maybe this is a sign for better things to come. And as a Bengals fan, I certainly hope not. At this rate, it's safe to say the Broncos may not be making the playoffs at 2-5. Things are looking bleak, but I really doubt that they will be so bad as to get the number 1 overall pick, something that Denver has actually never held before. In truth, out of the 32 teams, there's only 3 that have never had the number 1 overall selection, which includes the aforementioned Broncos, Ravens, and Seahawks. The Jaguars were actually among these teams up until 2021 when they were in last place in the NFL and had the number 1 overall pick, using that selection for Trevor Lawrence. Do you guys believe that the Broncos led by Russell Wilson are going to be so bad that they get the number 1 overall pick? It would genuinely be a surprise to me. A few weeks back, we touched on the most lopsided win in NFL history with the Bears defeating the Redskins 73-0. But in similar fashions, did you know that Dan Marino's last game as an NFL quarterback was almost just as lopsided as that score? In his final game against the Jaguars in the playoffs, Dan Marino's Dolphins were absolutely destroyed 62-7. And as I mentioned, this happened to be Dan Marino's final game in the NFL. What a way to go out. In a previous video, I mentioned that Dan Marino's last game happened to be one of the biggest routs in NFL history and playoff history at 62-7. But did you guys know that the score of 62-7 has happened on 3 separate occasions? Obviously, you include the aforementioned Jacksonville Jaguars' assault on Dan Marino. But the Atlanta Falcons did the same thing to the Saints back in the 70s when Archie Manning was running the show in New Orleans. And speaking of the Saints and Mannings for that fact, the New Orleans Saints in 2011 did the same thing to the Colts. This is the season that Peyton Manning was out due to a neck injury. I just find it crazy that 62-7 has happened more than once. That to me, that's insane. Did you know that with the win against the Jets on October 30th, 2022, Bill Belichick is now pushed into second place for most wins for a coach all time at 325 wins. That does include playoffs. To get to Don Shula, who holds the record at 347, Bill Belichick will need to win 22 more games in his career. I'd have to guess, based off the trajectory of the Patriots, that it'll take at least 3 more seasons for this to happen. So do you guys believe Bill Belichick has it in him to keep going to get the record, or do you think he'll retire before that happens? It's safe to say that the New Orleans Saints season may be lost in the 2022 year. This could be the end of the Jameis Winston / Andy Dalton era in New Orleans. So the question now becomes, do the Saints go with a quarterback in the first round? Well, first things first, they don't have their first round pick. But if they did, it seems like they probably wouldn't use it on a quarterback anyway. As did you know that the New Orleans Saints have not used a first round pick on a quarterback since 1971? Guys, that was Archie Manning. His grandson is about to be in the NFL soon. And I'd like to argue the most notable quarterback that they've drafted in any round since 1978 has been Mark Bulger in the 6th round. I know it won't be this year, but maybe next year they'll go first round quarterback. After their Week 11 loss to the Buffalo Bills, the Browns can finally unveil their big prized possession in Deshaun Watson. Now, how you feel about him is besides the point of this fact. But did you guys know that once this man starts for the Cleveland Browns, he will be the Browns' 33rd quarterback to have started since 1999. That is the most quarterbacks to start for one team since 1999, and it's not even close. Even teams like the Raiders, the Rams are nowhere near 36 different quarterbacks. Have the Browns finally found their solution at quarterback, or will this just fizzle out like they always do? Subscribe for more fun facts. The World Cup has finally arrived in the 2022 year. And as many of you know, the point is to win the game, right? When you don't win, at the very least in soccer, you do have the option to play in a 3rd place game. Did you guys know though that that was a thing in the NFL from 1960 to 1969, and it was absolutely hated by the players, by the coaches, everyone involved really. But when the NFL and AFL merged, the NFL did not go for this, as no one wanted to be a part of a 3rd place game. How do you guys feel about it though? From a fan's perspective, would you guys want to see a 3rd place game, or do you guys understand why it doesn't exist today? Guys, I want to give a huge shout out to this particular quarterback. This quarterback, who is now 36 years old, has only taken the field 5 times to start and has made well over $41 million in his career. This individual is Chase Daniel. Daniel, who went undrafted before being signed by Washington back in 2009, has amassed a said total of, $41 million throughout his NFL career. He's only started 5 games, meaning if you do the math, he has made $8.2 million per game that he has started. And if you want to dive even deeper, this man has only attempted 261 passes, meaning for every pass that he has attempted, he has made $157,000. This does make him the 61st most paid quarterback in NFL history. 61 is not that low, guys. At 36 years old, he might still have a few good years left in him, so we can officially dub Chase Daniel as Clipboard King. The Minnesota Vikings are 9-2 as of my recording and are en route to take over the NFC North. A big reason for that is their wide receiver, Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson has proved to be so dominant, in fact, that he just eclipsed Randy Moss for most receiving yards through your first 3 seasons in the NFL. And guess what? He still has another 7 or so games left to play. This may be too premature, but where do you guys think Justin Jefferson will rank when it's all said and done? Top 10? Top 5? Where do you guys think in receiving yards? Okay guys, big shocker here. The goal for an NFL team every single season is to win a Super Bowl. Obviously, it is the granddaddy of them all in terms of football games. Year-round, the Super Bowl is the most watched event in the United States and one of the most watched events around the world. Roughly 100 million television screens have the Super Bowl on. So if you were to ever hypothetically want to get a commercial, you know it's going to cost you a pretty penny because all eyes will be on your commercial. So much so that, did you know, for a 30-second commercial in the 2021 Super Bowl, you would have to cash out $5 million. So you better make those 30 seconds worth it. If you guys had a chance for a 30-second commercial in the Super Bowl, what would you guys want your commercial to be about? Let me know in the comments. One of the biggest controversies in the NFL today is the number of head injuries sustained and what they do to players over time. Long story short, the NFL is doing what they can to limit the number of headshots taken by the players. So much has gone into player safety that to me it's baffling that helmets were not even required by the NFL until 1943. Keep in mind, the NFL had existed for about 23 years to this point. Before that, it was more or less optional if you wanted to wear a helmet. It's crazy how far we have come along as a league. Subscribe for more fun facts. At one point towards the end of the third quarter, the Colts versus the Cowboys was actually a pretty close game at 19-21. However, that all changed in the fourth quarter as the Cowboys piled on the points, having 33 unanswered against the Colts in the fourth quarter. The Cowboys proceed to win 54-19. They have now accumulated the second most points in a quarter by any team in NFL history. There's only one team that has scored more points in the NFL in a quarter, and that is actually, surprisingly, the Detroit Lions, who did it against the Chicago Bears in 2007. Now with this win and the win that they had against the Vikings, are the Cowboys the team to beat in the NFL? Let me know in the comments. John Madden is known to be one of the greatest NFL coaches in NFL history, as well as holding the highest win percentage in NFL history. Or does he? Because did you guys know that there is one person that has actually a higher win percentage than John Madden? We gotta go back to the 1920s for a head coach by the name of Guy Chamberlain. He went 58, 16, and 7, a career win percentage of .784. A few notches above John Madden's .759. Probably the biggest reasons why you don't hear about Guy Chamberlain is, one, he was before the 1970 merger by about 50 years, and the teams that he coached for don't even exist anymore in the NFL, as he was the coach for the Canton Bulldogs and the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, but he was a coach for the Chicago Cardinals, who we now know as the Arizona Cardinals. We all know how difficult it is to make it to the NFL. You have to be the best of the best, and even then, you still might not turn out the greatest in this league. One thing that's very underappreciated are the coaches, because you also have to be one of the best of the best. I can't tell you how many times a coach from the college going to the NFL has struggled mightily. Just look at Urban Meyer, greatest in college, and well. Then you have coaches who do well, but they don't at the same time. For example, did you guys know that Jim Mora and Marvin Lewis are the only NFL coaches that have at least 100 regular season wins, but yet have 0 playoff victories? I can't tell if it's good or not, because like I said, it is hard to make it anywhere in this league. And to have 100 wins in the regular season is an impressive feat, no doubt. But to have 0 playoff wins, despite the amount of time that you've been in the league, I don't know. What do you guys think? Is that a good coach or a bad coach? Subscribe for more fun facts. A few years back, Jameis Winston had his famous 30 for 30 season, where he threw 30 touchdowns with 30 interceptions. As much as we want to give Jameis Winston a hard time for those 30 interceptions, he was not even close to the record for most interceptions in a season. The most interceptions in a season is held by George Blanda, where in 1962, he threw a whopping 42 interceptions in a season. Need I remind you guys, there was no 17 or 16 game seasons back in those days. The next closest person is Vinny Testaverde, where in his second year with the Bucks, he threw 35. So again, more than Jameis Winston. For a little side fun fact, Peyton Manning has the record for most interceptions thrown as a rookie, with 28 total back in 1998. Subscribe for more fun facts. Have you ever been curious about how the NFL decides the opponents for the following year for your favorite team?
Nope.
I'm going to tell you how they do it, as well as use the Bengals as an example, just so you can follow along. So just to knock these first 6 games out, you play each divisional rival twice a year. So for the Bengals, that's the Browns, the Steelers, and the Ravens. That's 6 games done. The next 4 games are in the same conference, but a different division. So for example, last year the Bengals played the AFC East. This year it was cycled to the AFC South. So the next 4 games are the Jaguars, the Titans, the Texans, and the Colts. From here, we have 4 more games with a different division of a different conference. Now, these will cycle every 4 years. The Bengals, for example, last year played the NFC South. This year, they're going to play the NFC West. So another 4 opponents, the Rams, the Niners, the Cardinals, and the Seahawks. Again, I gotta find a better way of counting this. So we're at 14 games here so far with 3 more games to go. 2 of these games come from the other 2 divisions that you're not playing in its entirety. For example, for the Bengals, we're playing the AFC South, so we're going to play somebody from the AFC East and the AFC West. This is dependent on where you finished last year in your division. The Bengals finished in first, so we're going to play first place of AFC West and first place of AFC East, meaning we're going to play these 2. I'm looking forward to it. Finally, the 17th game. This one may be the trickiest one, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to figure out. So for this, you have to go to the other conference and go back 2 seasons ago. Who did you play 2 seasons ago? What division did you play 2 seasons ago? For us, it was the NFC North that we played, and from there we got to play the team that finished in the same placement that we did. For us, we're going to play the Vikings, so it'll be Bengals versus Vikings. So there you have it. Let me know if there's any comments or questions that you have, and maybe I can fill it out for you at the bottom below.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
Wake up, do my business like who is this well-respected man? I keep it straight.
Así hay cacerías en mi caserío. Yo soy de Carrington, pero la...
Our whole universe was in a hot, dense state that nearly 14 billion years ago expansion started.